On that point, do you think Trump can achieve regime change with airstrikes alone?
I think he can.
Go ahead.
I think it's quite possible. You could see. Uh, First of all, we should preface this by saying that it's been a long burn, but if you date it back to July 1999 when you saw the first Tehran University uprising during their one reformer president Khatami, that there's been a kind of, I would say that the story is over the last say 27 years that this regime has lost all remnants of popular legitimacy. And we know that because even former hardcore, what we would say kind of hardline figures like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the Holocaust denying, Holocaust cartoon contest holding president that was responsible for stealing the election in 2009, that was sort of known as briefly as the Green Revolution. Even that guy has publicly said that this regime doesn't work and we need to come up with a new system. So that's on the kind of good side, which is that they really don't have any popular legitimacy and they only rule by fear. And I do think that it's an unknown, but if Iranians learn that the head of the IRGC and the supreme leader are now dead, that can open up psychological space where you will see that there will be an unstoppable kind of momentum in the streets, and there won't be orders to shoot them down as we saw in January, which was a horrible tragedy. But I think that Elliot makes a great point, which is that, okay, then what happens? Are there enough people with enough guns that still believe in the Islamic Republic, even though I don't think they represent even 10% of the population? Will they have enough to try to exert, let alone, regain control of the country? Would they have enough to be a kind of effective insurgency? And that we really don't know, and I think that there's a potentially very good chance of that. But the one thing I would say, though, is that there will be, I think, an enormous incentive to rebuild the country, and lots of people will want to try to get in on that because there will be potentially trillions of dollars that will, in contracts to kind of rebuild Iran, and I think lots of people will want to be part of that. And maybe there's an opportunity, if you believe that the vast majority of regime figures, even now, are really corrupt and they're not true believers, that they can be bought off. And so I think that's part of the gamble as well. I don't know the answer to it, because if you have enough, even if you have a minority of true believers and they have enough guns, you're still going to get an insurgency. And if we don't have boots on the ground, I don't know how you deal with that.
One scenario that people are worried about, that if there is something shy of regime change, that reformists will be even more restricted in the future. Are you worried about that as well?
I mean, the dream of reform has been over now for 20 years in Iran, and the argument that you can slowly transition Iran to something better, I think, that's played out and it hasn't worked. By the way, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact Elliot's late father had done incredibly important work on this, but there is an indigenous Iranian democratic opposition. And it's wide-ranging through class and ethnicity, and what they have said now for nearly 20 years is that they have very specific demands that they want. They want to get rid of the position of the supreme leader and the guardian council, and they want to return to basically what the Constitution was like between 1905, maybe 1925. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. There has been a serious democratic opposition in Iran, and if there is a way to kind of marry that leadership to people who have enough guns, there's a chance that it can work. I have not seen those plans. Some people hope that it's going to be the son of the late Shah, Reza Pahlavi, that does that. Again, he has some support in Iran, but we don't know yet. And so these are all a lot of unknowns. That's why it's a pretty big gamble.
And just for the listener, the Guardian Council is a group of 12 people, clerics, right?
Right.
And so what you're saying is essentially
They have an effective veto over the legislature, which is known as the Majlis, and also vet any candidates for the presidency.
So you're saying keep basically the government structure, get rid of the council, and
get rid of these institutions that were created after 1979, which basically defanged or neutered the structures that existed in Iran that kind of expressed the democratic aspirations of the people. Now, we should say, under the Shah, it wasn't terribly democratic either, at least, especially towards the end of the 1970s. But it was really chucked out the window once Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini came into power.
Elliot, I want to talk about the early response in America on both the right and the left. Many of Trump's critics are arguing that a responsible president, this is sort of how it's being written, would have sought congressional approval before striking. What do you say to that criticism?
And I think one of the things that adds to the risk profile of what the president is doing. I mean, if, again, forgive me, but obviously there's a lot to be sort of reminded of the Iraq War here. If we think of the lead up to the Iraq War was begun with pretty solid bipartisan support, and very quickly became extremely unpopular. So the president here is launching this attack with pressure on his right flank. Obviously, the left is not going to support it. So he himself at home, like, he has a very, very short political runway that he is working with. And the moment something goes sideways, whether it's a loss of U.S. life or chaos in the streets, I think he is going to be under absolutely enormous political pressure. So those who are, I think, criticizing him for not going to Congress, I think they're right to do so. There's a reason our country is set up that way. And when you go to Congress to get support for a war, what it gives you is a longer political runway to run that war, and gives you much more operational flexibility. He's going to have really pretty diminished operational flexibility because this thing can so easily go off the rails because of the way he's launched it. And I would just add to what sort of Eli was saying is, where we're seeing right now, the first one or two moves of a game that is like a 50-move game. And the articulation of the 48 moves that come after this move, I mean, I haven't seen it anywhere. So whether it hasn't been thought out or it's been secretly thought out, is yet to be seen. But the longer this goes on, the more it becomes a political conversation, both internationally but also domestically. In 2 months, if things aren't settled in Iran, a lot of people are going to be asking questions. What the hell's going on in Iran? Why is this not wrapping up?
Just to follow up on this critique, one thing that I have always been confused about is, how do you have a successful surprise operation and get congressional approval? It seems mutually exclusive, and that's always something I wonder when this critique is raised. Eli?
Well, I don't think that this. Oh.
No, you can go. You go first, Elliot. I mean,
I would say I don't think this is like a huge surprise. I mean, we've been telegraphing we're going to do things in Iran. You can get